Right, better put my bib on first, and then we're going to make some bread. So we're going to start by scrubbing our hands. There's a lot of kneading involved with making bread, and it's better to clean your hands beforehand than have all the dough clean them for you. Should do for now. Now I'm going to make about 750 grams worth of bread, and the fluid you put in the flour should be about 600 milliliters for a kilogram. So I'm going to get 400 milliliters of tepid water. So that's quite hot, so I'll need to top it up with some cold. Don't have to be too precise with this. I think that's about right. Might be a little bit warm. And we need about a tablespoonful of sugar to get the yeast going. And some salt. About a teaspoonful of salt. Will do. Now, the flour I'm going to use today, I'm going to use 500 grams of this Shipton Mill organic brown flour. It's got 3 different malts and some sunflour added into it, so that should be tasty. And it's a good idea to have some white flour mixed in as well, so I've got some Claybrook Mill strong white flour with a few seeds and flakes mixed into it, so that should add up to a nice tasty bread. The flour does come from this country. Britain tends to make quite a softish flour. Strong flour comes from places like Canada, where it's very dry in the harvesting season, but we do provide some strong flour as well, and that's what I'm using today. The softer flour is better for cakes and things like that. Anyway, I'll turn the scales on. Let it 0. There we go, 0. Tip some brown flour in. This isn't actually wholemeal, but you can see there's lots of bits and pieces in it. It looks really good. Haven't made this one before. So I want half of this bag, 500 grams, 400, 450, 470. And there we go, just about 500 grams. And then, as I say, some white flour stops it becoming too stodgy, lightens it up a bit. So I'm going to bring this up to 750. 730. That's it. And Don't need the scales anymore. What we do need now is a couple of teaspoons of yeast. This is the yeast I use. It's not ever so expensive. It keeps for ages in the fridge. You can see that I've used about half the packet so far and must have made about 6 loaves out of that. So all I'm going to do is sprinkle a couple of teaspoons onto the flour. There we go. Maybe just a little bit more for luck. And seal this up again. Pop it back into the fridge. Now I like to give that a bit of a mix in before I do anything else. Now a cunning plan here is that I keep it to about 750 grams of flour, because that way I can keep it more or less all in the bowl, so I can do all the kneading and everything in the bowl, and it saves getting a right old mess all over the counter. Anyway, here's my water. Need to stir that in a bit because it hasn't dissolved yet. Make a little well, dip about half in, spoon it together. The fun bit is coming up soon, getting your hands into there. There we go, pop the rest in. If I feel it's a little bit dry later, I can also add a bit more water. With wholemeal, tends to soak up the water quite a lot, so sometimes you do need a little bit more. This is brown flour though, which means that it's had the husk removed. It's sort of halfway between wholemeal and white flour. Don't want to add extra water straight away, even though it looks a bit dry. It's because it takes a little bit of time for the flour to absorb the moisture. I think we do need a little bit more there. It is a bit dry, so it's just got to be careful now not to add too much, just a little bit at a time. See how it comes together. Because if you get it too wet, comes to the cooking time, and you cook it for just over half an hour or so, and if you've made the dough too wet, it comes out a bit sort of soggy and chewy, and that's not nice. It's good to have a good texture to it. Nearly there. I'm just going to get a knife. I like to slice the dough up a bit. Still a bit dry there, you see. So slice it up a bit like this. Still feels a bit dry and heavy. So just a tad more. Turn it over. Got some good old grains in it, this. I think they're malted grains, it said on the packet, so this should make a nice malted loaf. Time to start. Oh yes, that's feeling good. Let's start to knead it in a little bit. We don't do the main kneading yet, we'll just get it going and then leave it for 5 minutes or so to get the gluten start working in the flour. make sure the moisture's been absorbed. So that's all it needs for the moment, and I'll come back to it in about 5 minutes. So I'll leave it there for now. So we've had about 5 minutes. You can see I always cover the dough while I'm leaving it, whether it's just for 5 minutes or half an hour. I've popped all the odds and ends away, all the flour that I don't need anymore. I've just got a little bit of wholemeal flour here in case I need to dust the dough a bit later on. So that's standing by. Right, now we've got to give it its first bashing around. Need to do this for about 10 minutes or so, well 5 at least, and this thoroughly mixes the flour. It's called a kneading. Strange name that, isn't it? Maybe it's because we need the bread to survive. Anyway, as you see, I'm keeping it all in the bowl. Otherwise all this sticky stuff on the bowl, that would get all over the counter, and that's an extra job afterwards, isn't it, to clean the counter. But all I need to do with this bowl when I've finished is pop it in water to soak, and it does the job for you. No point making work. Of course, you could get one of those bread making machines that do this. That takes the fun out of it, I think. And where do you put your bread making machine? You know, you've got to put it on the counter. It's cluttering up the world, isn't it? Looking horrible. And it's not really a secret art or anything, although I try to make out it is on that baking program on TV. All you need to do is just mash it up a bit. You see, this dough, it's feeling really quite wet now. I told you that it takes 5 minutes or so to absorb the water, and now it's really quite sticky. So what I'm going to do is just sprinkle a bit of flour on it and around the edge, and that will help to dry it a little bit, because the dough needs to sort of feel not sticking to your hands too much, but nice and silky and smooth. That's better now. Might have to sprinkle a bit more on in a bit. Now, as I say, I've got to do this for 5 minutes or so, or until it feels okay. It's not feeling too bad now. And then leave it for half an hour. That's called the first proving, and that allows the yeast to start to work. Starts to ferment slightly and sends off gases, which makes the bread light and airy. And then I come back to it and do all this again, and then I shall leave it to more or less double in size, but this time, the second time rather, I'll leave it on the baking tray ready to go straight in the oven once it's doubled in size. Well, I think it's had its 5 minutes. Now what I will do here is I'll just put a tiny little bit of sesame oil in the bowl, help it stop sticking as it rises. So just a little dribble there, just enough to wet it. Roll that around. There we go. Didn't need much, that was less than a teaspoon. That's giving it a nice smell as well, probably add a little bit of extra taste. So there we are. This time I'm going to leave it for half an hour. You could put cling film over it, but to be honest, I find that cling film sticks a little bit, and then you've got all the hassle of getting the stuck dough off the cling film. So I'm just going to cover it, put the sesame oil away. Might need this flour for the second lot of kneading, so we'll just leave it like that, and then we'll come back to it. Right, well, we're back in a good half an hour, and you can see that it's swollen up quite a lot. I've just turned the oven on because the next stage is to really give this a good bashing, and then I'm going to put it onto this tray over here, which is actually a pizza tray, but it lets the heat come up from underneath to bake the bread right the way through. And it'll go in the oven for about half an hour, but first, as I say, we've got to beat it right down. So get some flour on my hands, sprinkle a bit on there, and here we go. Hear it all squelch out there, all the gases that have made it swell like that. Give it a real good thump. And this is the last beating it gets. The next stage, and I've put it on the tray. It's got to be left very carefully because we want it to swell up to double its size, and gotta be careful when we put it in the oven. We don't want to bash it, we don't want a stream of air hitting it. Just be careful so it keeps its shape, and then when it comes out of the oven, should have a nice loaf. I think this is going to be a good one. See, that little bit of oil I put in earlier has stopped too much sticking to the edge of the bowl there. You see an awful lot of grains and seeds and things in here. I think it's going to be a real tasty old loaf, this one. Hope so. This final kneading is the one that should give it really good texture. Doesn't feel too wet, so that's good. In fact, it feels just right. Not too much sticking to my hands. So that's good. I have turned the oven on at this stage, even though it's got to have another half an hour of proving before it goes in the oven. But what I do is I put it just over the top of the oven on the grill door, so that it gets the warmth of the oven wafting up, and that helps it to prove and double in size. Should keep it out of drafts as well, because a draft on the dough when it's proving is not a good thing. So you do need to still keep it covered. Right, I'm going to leave it at that. Let's get the tray. It's a good idea to just sprinkle a little bit of flour on there so that it doesn't stick. There we go, that's nice. A bit on there too. So roll it over. Now, try and make this a tallish shape, because as it grows it's not got anything to hold it in place, so it'll expand out sideways. So I want to make sure it's got plenty of room to expand sideways. There we go. And make sure it's central. Cover it over. Open the grill door. Now in about 35-40 minutes that should be ready to go in the oven. So we'll come back then. Right, well it's had just over half an hour, so it should have had good time to rise and improve. Let's have a look and see what we've got under the tea towel. Oh yes, that's looking good. Now all I need to do is carefully put that into the oven. The oven's on 180 degrees and I'm going to give that 30-35 minutes and then we'll see what it looks like. Okay, well we've had just over half an hour, nearly 35 minutes. I think we need to take a look at what we've got. Looks quite nice. I'll just turn it over. Yeah, I think that'll be very good. So I'll leave it to cool for 10-20 minutes or so. Okay, it's had about 20 minutes or so to cool down. It's a bit warm, but what we'll do now is we'll put it on the pig breadboard there. And I'm going to cut it into 4. Of course, if I should have given it longer, now's the time when I'll find out. Oh no, that looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do is just cut it into 4. See, I won't eat all of it at once, that's the trouble. So if I freeze these quarters, I'll just pull them out of the freezer when I want them and they'll still be lovely and fresh. Mind you, I'll have to let them cool right down before I freeze them. I see it's still steaming away there. What I'll do is I'll just get a plate and put 3 of them on the plate to cool down. Cover them with the tea towel again. There we are. They'll be ready to freeze in a couple of hours or so. In the meantime, I can cut myself a slice of this bread. Oh, it looks brilliant. I'll just have a little taste of that, see what it's like. Nice little crunchy bits of grain in it. Very tasty. So there we are then. How easy was that?